People coming out for this program, and I want to welcome you to the 62nd Annual Jewish Book Fair. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Miriam Cheslin. I'm Program Coordinator for the Oak Park JCC Arts, Culture, and Education Department, which is known as the ACE Department. And at this time, I'd also like to ask everyone to please silence your cell phones and or any other noise-making devices so you can give all these wonderful students your undivided attention. I'd like to thank the co-sponsors of today's program, Jewish Senior Life, Holocaust Memorial Center, Goldman Family Campus. And today's day underwriters are Barbara and Douglas Bloom. Now, as many of you may know, this is the 4th year of the Kids Can Be Authors 2 program. And this year, in commemoration of the 75th anniversary of Kristallnacht, we are featuring the book Voices, The Past is Always Present, written by last year's Akiva Hebrew Day School's 8th grade students under the direction of their teacher, Judy Kessler. If you're here, Judy, please stand up. At the conclusion of the program, you'll be able to purchase the books, which are right behind the register, and if you can see the poster displaying the information about the books, and the students will be signing them at various tables in our lobby. You'll see their names are on the different tables. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Charlie Silow, Director of the Program for Holocaust Survivors and Families, Jewish Senior Life. And he'll tell you a little bit more about the program that led to the writing of this book. Charlie?
Okay, thank you, Miriam. It's interesting that our program today coincides with the 75th anniversary of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, where Nazi Germany launched a national pogrom against the Jewish people. Kristallnacht is seen as the beginning of the Holocaust. During Kristallnacht, at least 91 Jews were killed, 30,000 men were arrested and imprisoned in concentration camps. Jewish homes, hospitals, and schools were ransacked. Over 1,000 synagogues were burned to the ground, and over 7,000 Jewish businesses were destroyed or damaged. Today, as we will see in our program, the Jewish people has indeed survived the Holocaust, and that we continue to pass down our heritage, religion, and history to our children, to the next generation. We remember, and we are here. Mir Zayin and Du. 1 year ago, I was approached by Salomon-Kresch, a parent volunteer at Akiva Hebrew Day School, to help 8th grade students at Akiva find Holocaust survivors to be interviewed for Mrs. Judy Kessler's course on the Holocaust. I invited the class to come to Cafe Europa, a monthly event of our program for Holocaust survivors and families, in which Holocaust survivors come together to socialize. The Akiva students came to Hanukkah Cafe Europa, where they met and got to know survivors in a warm and friendly atmosphere. Later, the students in turn invited the survivors to come to Akiva to celebrate Purim together. The survivors and students made Hamantaschen together, listened to music, and were entertained by the delightful kindergartners singing Jewish songs. The survivors were so moved to see Jewish children continuing to celebrate Jewish holidays, our Jewish religion, and Jewish education. They were very impressed to see that the Jewish people has indeed survived and continues to thrive. Many of the survivors agreed to be interviewed by the students to share with them their life histories for Mrs. Kessler's class. Mrs. Kessler's students studied the Holocaust through literature and history and became sensitized to what happened to our people. I would like to acknowledge Mrs. Judy Kessler, who is one of the most outstanding, dedicated, and inspirational teachers at Akiva. She is fantastic. My own daughter will attest to that. Salomon-Kresch had the foresight to document the interactions of the survivors with the students as well as to include the survivor interviews conducted by the students into a book. Voices is a book of remembrance. It is a book where the older generation tells the younger generation of their experiences in the Holocaust. It is a modern recounting of the persecution and slavery of our Jewish people to the next generation. Similar to our Passover service, one generation teaches the next generation about what happened to our people. We thank Salomon-Kresch for her foresight, her dedication, and for all of her hard work in bringing voices to fruition. Susie, please stand. We want to thank Rabbi Aaron Lieb, the middle school principal at Yeshiva Akiva, on behalf of Akiva's great support and involvement in this most incredible project. Rabbi Lieb, please stand. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you all for attending today's special event. Now I have the distinct pleasure and honor to introduce to you Stephen Goldman, the executive.
That's my microphone. Marvin!
The executive director of the Holocaust Memorial Center, Goldman Family Campus. Since 2010, Stephen has been the director who's had such an incredible influence in our community. He's opened up the Holocaust Memorial Center. It's more accessible. It's a coming together of all groups, and we are so privileged to have Stephen as our director. Thank you, Stephen. Everyone, please welcome Stephen Goldman.
Thank you, Charlie. I'll wait for Marvin to turn down the microphone. Does anybody not hear me? Oh, good. I don't even need the microphone. Thank you all for coming in support of these wonderful young authors and these not-so-young survivors. It's a great crowd to have to add extra chairs. The historical interview is a special medium, created in the mind and heart of the interviewer and a challenge to the interviewee. It becomes a unique dialogue in an intimate setting. This dialogue is a journey into the memory of another. Two persons, in this case, one young, one old, who become forever entwined in the past and the present simultaneously. These young people expose themselves to the oftentimes difficult stories of the Holocaust, not from a distance, as if reading it in a book or even visiting the Holocaust Memorial Center, but in the moment of revelation by a witness. These experiences, difficult to remember, even more difficult to tell, are hard to hear and record. They are the essence of this book, Voices, The Past is Always Present, authored by these young people and gathered into this important document, this book by Dr. Susan Salomon-Kresch. So I thank you all for coming. I thank these people. Now, let's meet our authors. I'll be asking each of you a question. I'll be introducing you, asking you each of a question, and step to the microphone or pick up the microphone to answer. I know you've had a little time to think about this. Danielle Silverman's interview of Fela Simkowitz revealed interesting details of life in pre-war Poland, and they titled her chapter, From Darkness to Light. Danielle, even though you read about the Holocaust and visited the Holocaust Memorial Center, what did you specifically learn from your interview about courage, survival, and the strength of faith that would make you a stronger person?
Okay. I thought it was really amazing that I could interview somebody who went through so many hardships in their life when they were younger, and she really learned to deal with what had happened to her and move past from that and make her life better for the rest of her life. And I think I could take from that to be able to move past from the things that I go through and to learn how to take every day and enjoy what I have.
Thank you, Danielle. Escape from the unimaginable. 1, 2, 3. That works better. is the life story of the great uncle Dave Kresch. Is David Zwick's interview? Nope.
David Kresch.
David Kresch, I'm sorry. This is difficult for me. David Kresch's interview. David's chapter includes his great uncle's fantastic journey and includes images of his uncle's Israeli military ID.
I interviewed my great uncle Dave for this about his experiences in the Holocaust, and I had already heard many times my grandfather's stories of the Holocaust, and I expected them to be very similar, but they're actually very different. When he was a child, and his family decided to send two of the children to an orphanage in Siberia, a Polish orphanage, because they heard they were sending them to Iran, and they would be able to escape. So my great uncle was actually sent to Siberia, to an orphanage, and sent to Iran, while my grandfather was in Siberia. And he ended up, my great uncle Dave ended up in Israel and became an Israeli soldier in the Israeli army. So I'm proud that he was one of the very first soldiers in the Israeli army, and he was able to defend and protect the Jewish people in Israel.
Thank you, David. Jason Julis interviewed Otto Herzeg and learned of Otto's journey from sorrow, the title of this chapter, in which Jason discovers how then 13-year-old Otto survived. Jason, why do you think it is important for you and others of your generation to learn about the Holocaust through the voices of these survivors?
It is important to learn about the Holocaust to ensure that we do not forget the Holocaust, because those who forget the Holocaust are condemned to repeat it. I like to share Mr. Herzeg's own words. I do not have a problem sharing my stories so others know what happened.
Two of our authors interviewed Andy Martin. Josh Kornblum interviewed Andy, whom he knows as a neighbor, and learned of his selflessness. Josh, you interviewed someone with whom you are familiar. Had you heard these stories before? And if so, what did you learn that is new? And how is interviewing different from just listening?
Yeah, Mr. Martin has lived across the street from me my whole life, and I have heard that he was a Holocaust survivor, but I did not get the chance to hear his stories. But with this opportunity, I got to hear them come to life, and I'd just like to share a little quote. The same people prior to the war were doctors, businessmen, and lawyers. The Holocaust robbed these people of their dignity, and for some stole their most valuable possessions. Andy Martin is one of these people. And I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Commander Schloss also interviewed Andy and discovered that Andy had served in the Allied forces. The title of their chapter is Strength to Carry.
Although today was the first day that I actually got to meet Mr. Martin, his story truly inspired me to enjoy life and live life to the fullest. Thank you for sharing your story.
Shlomo Ben Ezra interviewed Avram Shane on Avram's adventure from pain. That's the title of his chapter, and learned about his prodigious memory and accuracy and his sense of humor. Even though, Shlomo, you have read about the Holocaust and visited the HMC, what did you specifically learn from your interview about courage, survival, and the strength of faith that would make you a stronger person?
What really struck me was how passionate and appreciative of their religion these courageous survivors were. In contrast, nowadays some people are trying to evade praying or trying to pull against it, while these people fought for their religion and did everything they could to keep it. And I also have a quote from Abram Shame before he left his house when he knew the Nazis were invading. So, before leaving, his father put his gentle hands on Abram's head and gave him a blessing. Abram, when you go, I want you to promise me to be straight in your life. Do not steal, be nice, and and good things will happen. He lives by those words.
Rafi Lerman interviewed Evie Santeri and learned of her strength and faith in her journey, as they titled their chapter, On a Highway of Hope. What do you think is important for you and others of your generation to learn about the Holocaust through these interviews?
It is important to learn about the Holocaust so that the memory will never be forgotten. If a tragedy like this would ever happen again nowadays, it would be impossible to forget. How could that be different from then? I would like to share something from her words. Sorry, I can't find it, but it is, like I said, it is very important to never forget a tragedy like this. And by us interviewing these Holocaust survivors, that memory will never actually die.
Mickey Stebbins interviewed Manny Middleman, a member of his congregation and a family friend, to learn how he coped with, as they titled it, a man's worst nightmare. You interviewed someone with whom you are familiar. Have you heard these stories before? And what is new? What did you learn new by interviewing rather than just listening?
I interviewed Manny about a year ago for an assignment because we had to write a book. Still amazes me is that he survived the Holocaust after going through many camps where he was tortured and starved. When he was liberated, he only had the clothing on his back. Now he's a respected figure in the community. Because he never gave up, like Yogi Bear said, it ain't over till it's over.
Yoni Katz interviewed Michael Weiss' Journey to Happiness, the title of their chapter, Through Hunger and Miracles Without Wavering in His Faith. I want to learn what Yoni has learned about courage, survival, and strength of faith that makes him a better person.
It makes me look back at some of the times that I might have complained or lost faith in God. And when I see all these people that fought for their lives and still kept faith in God, it inspires me to go overcome any challenge I have in the future. Let me read a passage about Mr. Weiss. Mr. Weiss was not only had faith in the fact that he would survive, but also has faith in the Jewish nation. Because of his experiences, he knows in reality racism and hatred do exist, but he also is confident that God created goodness too.
Tal Eschler not only learned the story of Etka Goldenberg and how she survived and came to Detroit, but of her faith and commitment to Jewish learning. Why do you, Tal, think it is important to learn from these elders among our community?
I think it's very important to learn from these Holocaust survivors because it's personal to learn from what they have to say as opposed to just reading it as a book, like at the Passover Seder, where we learn about the story. It would be great if we could learn from one of them who traveled through the desert, but I learned from Etka, who was a Holocaust survivor, about the Holocaust. It was a great experience. Thank you, Etka.
Levy interviewed her Zeta Benno Levy, a survivor and World War II veteran who is, as her chapter is titled, Standing Tall. The photo in the book of Benno and Chava clearly shows the love between them. You interviewed someone with whom you're familiar. What new did you learn by doing the interview rather than just talking with your grandfather?
Something that I learned is that before the interview, I never really thought of it as like a big deal, like that my grandfather was like all these war stories. It just sounded like a story. I didn't see the importance to it. But doing this book, I learned that it's just such an important thing to remember the Holocaust, and knowing that my grandfather was a part of it, and that he was such a hero, and that all these people appreciate him, and they're all here today to come and listen to him. It's unbelievable, and I think that it's really important that everybody knows that the Holocaust happened, and there are true heroes that experienced terrible things, and I think that I learned like a lot from this. I really appreciate it a lot.
Jonah Peterson interviewed Jerry Krause, who survived as a youngster alone, and learned about the title, The Survival of the Fittest. I want to know what Jonah has learned new about courage and strength that makes him a better person today for having done that interview.
When I interviewed Jerry, he told me a lot of things that happened in his childhood that were very tragic and that I would never expect to happen to anybody. And once he told me, it really had an effect on me, and I visualized what in his shoes, what had happened. Surviving, having to go from place to place, it's very upsetting. And I learned a lot that, you have to, really appreciate where you come from, and appreciate what you have.
Gordon Weil interviewed his grandfather, Morris Prostak, and their photo in this chapter shows Morris, and he stood before the door of death.
My grandfather never really told me about his experience until this interview. And when I interviewed my grandfather afterwards, I saw him as a hero. And afterwards, I realized that he never gave up during the Holocaust. And I would like to say this quote. Thanks to God, even though I had a rough start in life, I have a wonderful life, he proudly says.
Jonah Grant learned about a special strength of spirit and took a look into the past when he interviewed Freda Fleisch. Why do you think it's important to learn from these wonderful people?
I think it's very important that we learn from these people because pretty soon only the stories that we're writing down and the pictures are the only testament to the Holocaust actually happened. And if people don't write these down, then who will?
Alex Fisher interviewed Renee Lichtman and learned about the life of a child survivor who was hidden but not forgotten. What did you learn from Renee about courage, survival, and strength of faith?
We read Night in class, and even though I understood that was a true story, it still seemed like words on a page. But when I interviewed Mr. Lichtman, the stories just seemed to come to life. In his own words, you see, this story is the kind of story you're not really going to get the details of in a museum, because it's a different story. It's more psychological and emotional, about relationships between the people in this war, this Holocaust.
Nathan Clauser interviewed Lily Weiss, who walked the path of life and taught Nathan the value of friendship and companionship. What did you learn from Nathan? Did you interview Nathan?
No.
Oh, you're Nathan. What did you learn from, sorry, Lily? I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
I learned many things from the interview I did from Mrs. Weiss. I remember I learned one major theme, that this can never happen again, and that this book is a living testament of what really happened and how we learned what happened and what was in it, what happened in the Holocaust, and to prevent it from ever happening again.
David Zwick, you interviewed my good friend and artist Martin Lowenberg, who, when he speaks, speaks not only about the Holocaust experience, but about how we can prevent future genocide and prejudice. What did you learn from him?
I learned that one of the most important things to prevent this is to tell the stories, because he said that hate is a terrible word. But what I learned through the stories is that hate is not just a terrible word. It's a terrible idea with terrible consequences. And if we learn about those consequences firsthand, we will be able to understand as human beings to strive to not have anything that will provide these consequences and to eliminate hate from the world.
I got everybody? Oh, good. Well, before you give a final round of applause to our young authors, I'd like them to stand. Go get their survivor that they interviewed, and come up and stand before everybody so we can give everybody, the authors, the interviewees, these survivors, an extra hand. So. Let's thank these wonderful young people for their efforts, their emotions, and what they have learned. And our survivors. All the survivors now, please stand. All the survivors in the room. Your stories, your lives, you live on through these young people and their children through future generations. Again, I want to thank these young people, these wonderful authors. Buy the book. Have them autograph it. I read it. It's really terrific. So thank you again for coming. In this very place, at 4 o'clock, Richard Brightman will be speaking about FDR and the Jews. We hope you'll stay or come back. He's also speaking this evening at the JCC in West Bloomfield. Again, thank you for coming. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with these young people.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Stephen.